you're gonna look great. But if you wanna stay in shape, well, you better hit the GymWits.
That's right, man. You tell 'em.
Welcome to the GymWits podcast. I'm Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, a.k.a. Chef Sonic.
And I'm Toni Marinucci, your registered dietitian, aka Tips with Toni.
So, Toni, I know you're on your way to your half marathon, and you just completed a 10K, right?
Yes, I did the 10K. It was maybe 2 weeks ago.
How'd that go?
It was actually surprisingly it went really well. I finished. I didn't stop the whole time when I was running. I finished in like an hour and 4 minutes.
Oh, nice.
It was like a 10:26 pace, so it pretty much was like what I was aiming for, because as you guys know, I started at like a 10 closer to 12-minute pace.
Okay, yeah.
And I don't know, it felt good. In the beginning I was like, how the heck am I going to do this? Like, it's 10K is like 6.2 miles, right? Yeah. And I'm going to do 13.2.
Wow. Yeah.
In the beginning I was like, this is just the beginning of like what I'm actually going to have to do in a few months, like in the next month or whatever. But once I finished it, I felt really good. And
nice.
Yeah, so I just wanted it to be over with though.
Have you done any longer runs yet? Have you done anything beyond the 6 miles during your training?
Well, so I did. I was doing really well. I think the problem is I started training too early, too like fast, because I had peaked and my longest was like an 8 to 9 mile run. And then I kind of was like, all right, I want to go back to my cross training workouts. This is great. I can do it. Like mentally, I felt better. I felt stronger. I achieved everything that I wanted to. And then I was like, okay, I have like another month of this. So this Saturday is supposed to be a long 9 mile run.
Yeah. It's like a catch-22, because on one hand, mentally, there's a finite amount of time that you'll be excited and engaged in running, but physically you need that time to prep the body and get comfortable and adapt to the stress that comes with running. So it's kind of a tough position to be in.
And you say it all the time, and I say it about diet. It's like finding a workout that you enjoy so it's sustainable. Yeah. And I'm like learning to like it, but I still don't love it. And it's kind of hard to motivate yourself to work out when you're not like excited about what you're going to do.
Yeah. Maybe you should consider seeing a hypnotist.
Maybe
to hypnotize you into really liking running.
Yeah, maybe I should.
If only it worked that easy.
Yeah.
Well, one thing you really do enjoy doing, and that's why it is sustainable, is your job, right?
I do love my job a lot. A little too much, because I have 3 of them. But yeah, that's your segue, right?
That is my segue. So I think it's important to love your job. I know not everyone loves their job, or not everyone loves their career, but it's certainly an important thing for happiness, one of the important things in life. And it's a career right now that's pretty open, right?
Yeah.
There's a demand for it, correct?
Huge demand. Actually, one of our listeners just reached out to me and asked me if I was a nutritionist as a hobby. Mm-hmm. And it really brought to light the fact that so many people don't know the difference between a nutritionist and a registered dietitian, and how it is so much a career path.
Well, I'm a nutritionist.
Well, you can say that.
Right?
That's fine. So also we have listeners that have just been interested in going into becoming a registered dietitian, wondering if it's worth it for them. So I thought it'd be a good episode to talk about the steps involved and how you can make a career out of it.
So I guess what is the difference between registered dietitian and nutritionist? We've talked about it before.
We've talked about this before. So briefly, I'm just going to say that all registered dietitians are nutritionists, but not all nutritionists are registered dietitians.
So we interviewed a nutritionist, a certified holistic nutritionist.
I remember, yes.
Who owned her own business.
Yes.
Provided food. And she said that the big difference was that a dietitian is more scientific, that they will look at your current physical state and they will give you this, the sort of scientific diet behind what you need to do, while a nutritionist kind of looks at everything. Almost, it was a slightly holier than thou answer, I thought, with an implication that there's a spiritual side to being a nutritionist, and I know that a lot of people that are nutritionists are spiritual in that way.
It sounds kind of just like if someone were to say, what's the difference between a personal trainer and a physical therapist? And instead of saying, well, physical therapist has very specific educational requirements and a trainer has to get a certification. But if I went on a roundabout way, like, well, a physical therapist is focused on injuries and recovery, and trainers are going to be focused on the whole body and developing your body in the way that you see fit and the trainer sees fit, and just come up with a roundabout way when it's really just, well, one has a specific education requirements and the other one doesn't.
That's the perfect analogy. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I know I cut you off, but I thought, okay, I have the analogy. I think
perfect.
It works.
And you know what's also perfect about that is there are plenty, so you can argue both ways, but there's plenty of personal trainers that get their certification by just reading a textbook, but that doesn't mean they can apply it in real life, right? Whereas a nutritionist can take a certification, or to be honest, it's so lightly unlicensed or
regulated
regulated that you could just call yourself that because you have an interest in it and you want to help people, and you might know something because you have the journey and you went through it yourself. But when it comes to actually creating an intervention and treating someone on an individual level and a more specific level and having a broad education and understanding of that person, there's going to be some differences.
Yep, that works.
So what's the first step in entering into this world?
So first is you need an undergraduate degree or a bachelor's degree in science, or nutrition or dietetics or food and nutrition. So it has to be an accredited program, for one, recognized by the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, who are what grant you your certification. The test goes through them, your requirements are through them. So you have to definitely get some sort of bachelor's of science or nutrition or dietetics, and we can go into detail about that those classes are if you want as well.
All right, well, do tell us about the classes.
Yeah, I will. Well, you know what I think might be easier if I just tell you my story of how I became, when I applied to school, what I looked for, and all that. So when I was in high school, I knew I wanted to become a registered dietitian, and I looked for schools that had the dietetics major. And I only looked and targeted at those schools. And I ended up going...
That's dietetics and not Dianetics.
No,
by L. Ron Hubbard, right?
No.
The Scientology thing? Okay.
No. So I only looked at those schools. So I got accepted to a college upstate New York. It's called SUNY Oneonta. And they have a really, really well-known dietetics program. So when I went there, so my first year, you have to get your general things like, your math classes and your gym classes and whatever, like any other college student their first year. But you do basically your first year, you take Nutrition 100, which is actually what doctors take their first year of medical school, what most people take, honestly. Actually, you're with the general population, you have to take Nutrition 100, right? So you take a basic nutrition course, and then, believe it or not, you take things like food science or food safety, and because it's not just dietetics and nutrition that you're learning, but you're learning about food. And as I talk about the other classes, you're going to learn actually what other things that registered dietitians can do, which is pretty cool. So your first year is pretty basic. And then your second year, you do more microbiology, organic chemistry. You're taking all the sciences, anatomy and physiology. You're really trying to understand the body, understand how to look at things on a cellular level, because it is a science. Nutrition is a science. And then you obviously, as you go from one year to the next, you take things from like nutrition through the lifespan. So you learn about how to help someone from when they're pregnant to when it's an infant, through the toddler years, through adolescence, through adulthood, through the elderly. You might take what's called community nutrition, which is learning about how RDs, registered dietitians, can help on a public standpoint, and things like this food stamp program, or getting grants and helping with people who maybe have gone through like a recent disaster and they're food insecure. You learn about those programs. And then you go into advanced nutrition. So, it's not just talking about what are carbohydrates, what are proteins, what are fats, but how do they work in the body, and also the micronutrients, breaking it down, learning on a cellular level. It really gets pretty complicated. And then you take what's called medical nutrition therapy, which I think is the most applicable to talk about today, because that's where I think the misinformation is that registered dietitians can only help with what's called medical nutrition therapy, that scientific level, but it is a pretty strong component. So with medical nutrition therapy, you take medical nutrition therapy 1 and medical nutrition therapy 2, and in those classes you're learning basically the chronic disease states or autoimmune diseases, whatever disease state that can happen to a person in a clinical setting or outpatient setting that's diagnosed by a doctor, and there is a nutrition intervention that can be put in place. You're learning about what signs and symptoms to recognize, what interventions to put in place, and then the codes in which where you would have to document that. So that's like the nutrition from beginning to end. It gets like pretty basic, and then it progresses. And then you also have like food service, which I was saying before is the other component, which you're learning about like how do you do like recipe modifications. I'll remember like the most fun I had was in a food science class, and we would take like the gum from okra and replace it instead of fat in brownies, and the brownies came out amazing. And it was like doing testing like that, and
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool. Then the not so fun side about the food service is, believe it or not, registered dietitians are qualified to manage kitchens in any institution pretty much. So we also would have to learn about like ordering the right amounts of fruits and vegetables, and ordering the right amounts of grains, and making sure that, you know, you had food quality and food safety in place, and that the workers knew what their job was, because eventually, you know, we could also
being extremely important, though.
Is super important. And, you know, you're working, especially if you end up getting placed in, say, like a hospital setting, you really need to learn kind of how to educate the employees who are actually serving the food to the patients. So another part of like medical nutrition therapy is recognizing that, say, a person is unable to chew or swallow, they get seen by a speech pathologist, they have to alter the consistency of the diet, and they're ordered to be on a puree diet. You need to make sure if you're in the management position, you're checking the trays and making sure that the people that are working for you understand what pureed food is or what's acceptable on that diet, and you're going to be checking the trays for accuracy. Yeah, so I mean, I could literally, this is like the good thing about being a registered dietitian, is we learn so much, and I could go on and on honestly about like how much information that we take in, and that's just in your undergraduate degree.
So I guess to change gears in a little bit on this, so anytime someone wants to do something, right, you have your expectations. So like when I wanted to become a trainer, I had my expectations. I was going to be training, you know, elite athletes, and I'd be motivating people to get into shape. And then the reality is, you know, a lot of it is the average person, and a lot of it is just getting people motivated to show up at the gym.
Right.
And you become kind of a pseudo therapist. And so there are all these things kind of tied to being a trainer that I didn't expect, and you're not sold on. You don't really learn much of it in training. So as a dietitian, did you have a similar experience? Were there things that you had your expectation, and then like what's the reality of a dietitian that maybe you didn't learn in school, you didn't expect when you decided to embark on this journey? Yeah, so
I think the expectation is exactly that. Like, you want to help people be the healthiest versions of themselves. And then you get usually initially through your dietetic internship, which happens after your graduate degree. It's a lot of clinical based work where you're put in a hospital or a nursing home, and these people are very sick, and they're honestly at the point where it's not about getting them in the best fit, like making them the healthiest version of themselves. It's getting them healed enough so that they can go home and go back to their lifestyle and finish their recovery. Yeah. You know, so it's very rare that you're going to get a patient that actually is like waiting for your arrival to enter their room. You know, they're overwhelmed. They have doctors and nurses and you know, social workers and speech pathologists and just admission workers and just everyone just like constantly, like, they're out of their place. They're not in the environment they're comfortable with. They were just told they have a diagnosis that they've never had before. I mean, it's a very overwhelming setting. And as important as the registered dietitian is in that setting, right, obviously they need proper nutrition to heal, it's not always the place where they're going to be receptive to that information. And so the internship is very clinical heavy. And then usually what happens after, it used to be that when it came to hiring registered dietitians, they would want you to have clinical experience first, but I'm not finding that anymore. I'm finding that, there's such a high demand out there right now for registered dietitians, and the pool for the places where you can work are so much more broad that you don't have to do clinical right away if that's not what you want to do. And surprisingly, I actually enjoyed clinical, even though I made it sound like not the best. It's really cool that, when someone, for example, is unfortunately dependent on a feeding tube, and you have to calculate and estimate their needs and figure out how much and what it's the appropriate formula to put in that feeding tube, and knowing that you've got someone to being almost like non-functioning to you watch them kind of grow and heal, and then they're fully functioning. It's pretty cool because nutrition played a key role in that. So there's a lot of aspects to it that you're going to go into with expectations, might be disappointed, but the great part about it is there's so many other wonderful opportunities that you don't have to settle for just that one place where you felt like you weren't getting what you anticipated.
So what are some of the institutions or places that will hire? Obviously a hospital, like a nursing home type deal. So my full-time job is super unique and not a lot of people know about it. I actually work in a supermarket. When that's relatively new, the program that I work for has been going on for I've been working for them for 2 years now, but they've been hiring registered dietitians for 10 years, and all different supermarkets will hire registered dietitians differently depending on your state or your country or where you're from. But so some supermarkets will have you do the approved menus, or put RD approved on some of their products to help with sales, or create a newsletter to educate the public in a prevention of health way, or help them navigate them through the healthier products. The great part about my job is I don't just do that part. I do that part, but I also have my own office and I do counseling there. And so if anyone, I happen to work at I do private counseling, and there just so happens to also be a pharmacy that's there. So they refer to me, I refer to them. And we pretty much, have a relationship where I can do counseling. I can then say I have someone that's coming in for weight loss, and I'm trying to explain to them the differences of how to read the label and what to look for. I can then bring them to the aisle and take something that they're normally eating and show them the differences, and then apply that knowledge and see if they actually understood what I was saying in the session. Because sometimes with outpatient counseling, as we think we're leading people on the right path, and then they come back and they didn't do anything, and it's because they didn't understand what you were saying. And now I get to actually physically show them, which is really a unique opportunity. Now, what about schools?
You can work in schools as well.
Someone's got to order the food for the cafeteria.
Well, yeah. So you can approve the menu for the kids in the schools. You could also, a job I used to have was I worked at preschool, and if they had an allergy or an intolerance or a sensitivity, I would meet with the parents and talk with the parents about, what we can do for them here, or just give them guidance or guidelines if, say, they were, had anemia or problems gaining weight, maybe they weren't growing appropriately. I would help them with their nutrition in that sense.
Now, what about for government agencies like the FDA? They obviously have to have some dietitians working for them as well.
Yep, they definitely do. And then also the whole other form of nutrition, it's a science. We have dietitians that do research as well. So you can go that route. You can work for government agencies, and you can work behind the scenes, or you could be the one in the community really trying to get, for example, now we're doing pretty well, but there's locations where they're called food deserts, where certain locations just aren't surrounded by plentiful fruits and vegetables, and that's where registered dietitians will be that advocate and really trying to either get the nutrition close to them so that they can access it, or educate them about how to find that food, or how to cook with more canned food if that's all there is available to them.
And what about just having your own practice? Can people just do freelance?
Yeah, so that's something I'm working on right now. There are some licensures, and it's dependent on the state that you're in and where you're working, but there's definitely some ability to create your own practice for sure.
What about working with like a podcast team?
Yeah, that you could do. It was my favorite thing to do. So
Great answer.
Yeah, well, blogging, that part of my career is my favorite part. So it'll be nice for one day for me to like only have my private practice and then blog. That's like that's like the goal, the big goal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sounds great. So now I guess shifting gears once again, what about the psychological satisfaction that you get from this? Like going home at the end of the day, being able to looking at yourself in the mirror and knowing that you are really making a difference in people's lives.
Yeah, I mean, the day-to-day stuff sometimes obviously gets monotonous, right? So you sometimes find that you're like, I love what I do. I love everything that I do, but you want more all the time, right? And then whenever you're thinking that, you'll get that one person that comes in and I almost cried the other day.
Yeah.
Like,
so it's emotional as well.
It gets emotional because you'll have people that just come with all this misinformation. They're not sure what to do or how to do it. And you have to have patience. As a registered dietitian, you definitely have to have patience.
Well, if you don't have patience, then who's going to pay you? Sorry.
Oh, God.
I guess the institution will.
He always puts the witty in the GymWits. It never fails. But yeah, so, I mean, I'm going to just disclose one of the stories because it really means a lot to me. I had someone who was diagnosed at a very young age, a young male. I'm not going to say too much because I have a HIPAA and I don't want to, I have to protect us. But middle-aged male who found out that he had multiple sclerosis, and it put him into a depression, and he didn't know what to do, and he kind of just let himself go and gained about 100 pounds. And he came to me because he was diagnosed with diabetes. So I had to help him to control his diabetes and lose the weight so he can feel better and function better, because with multiple sclerosis, it really just takes over your muscles and your body, and some days you can walk and some days you can't, but obviously weight doesn't help with that.
Sure.
So I basically worked with him, helped him, and consistently saw him making changes, losing the weight, feeling better. And just recently I asked him, and I said to him, what changed? Because at first he wasn't really taking my advice, right? And eventually he said to me, I just got tired of being tired, and I didn't want to be limited anymore. And you reminded me that I'm still young and that I have a full life ahead of me. Wow. And he's lost 100 pounds, and I'm going to cry. So, he used to not be able to walk without a walker at 20-something years old. And now he's going to the gym regularly, and he wants to start boxing. And it's like a new person sits in front of me. And that's why I love what I do. And that's why I keep doing what I do. And that's why I'll always be a registered dietitian and continue this amazing, passionate career of mine. Thank you for that. That was not on the questions. I had to throw that in there. That was not part of the questions. And now I'm crying.
So there you go. If you want to cry, become a registered dietitian.
No. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of hard work, but you need passion to get through it, to continue doing it. And like any job, you're going to have things that stand in your way, but you just got to, push past it. And the reward is always beneficial.
That's great.
Yeah.
So, well, anything else you'd like to mention about?
Well, I didn't say that you have to get a fifth-year degree in the internship, but I think we talked about that when I was on the show before. And I'm pretty sure in 2020 they're going to guarantee a master's degree.
Okay.
I just so happened to find a program where I did my internship and my master's degree at the same time.
So there you have it. Great career path, helping people. One question, it's always, a little bit, you don't like to ask these questions, but does it pay okay?
Good question. So, it depends where you work for.
Sure.
I think it's decent pay. It's really hard to say, and I know we have listeners outside of America, and should I say numbers? I don't know.
No.
But I think it's definitely decent pay.
You can if you want.
No,
you can disclose it if you wish. Yep.
Well, like anything, you work your way up, right?
Sure.
So you're going to start, if it's clinical, you start as a registered dietitian, then you become maybe a lead dietitian, then you can be the clinical nutrition manager. You could even become a food service director, so you can work your way up. If you stay with the position, you get more responsibilities, then you obviously get paid more. Outpatient, you can charge what you want. You can work with the insurance companies. They can reimburse you.
So you can get reimbursed by insurance companies.
Oh, yeah. That's the huge difference between a registered dietitian and a nutritionist. Since a registered dietitian can work with the medical doctors and nurses, they're able to bill for insurance. It depends on the diagnosis. So diabetes is covered. Any sort of kidney problems are covered. And then some insurance agencies will reimburse you for just general prevention or weight management.
So you're okay taking blood money from evil corporations?
Oh, gosh.
Just being stupid, sorry.
Even though when you do go outpatient, you don't have to take insurance. Like currently, as I'm building my own practice, I don't take insurance.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually, once I obviously have a lot of clients, I'm going to have to get my LLC, become an official business. And then once I have that, then I can actually bill for insurance. So you don't have to, but it definitely, more people might come and see you because you have that opportunity, and then they won't have to pay out of pocket. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's a lot about being a registered dietitian. It actually sounds like a fascinating career and a really worthwhile one to embark on.
Yeah, you can do so many things. And you guys know how to contact me. So please, if you're thinking about becoming a registered dietitian, if you have questions about what I do, please reach out, because I will be happy to answer any questions, because it's definitely going to be specific to the person. I can really only speak to the United States. It's particularly New York, but it's pretty general throughout most of the United States.
What if someone would like to actually see you professionally? Have you be their dietitian? Is there a place where they can come to you, with your own practice?
Oh, yeah. You can email me at tipswithtoni@gmail.com. And if you want individual counseling, my business is online. So I do it through an online platform, so I can reach a lot of different people. So I usually do Skype or FaceTime or phone, but once again, usually within the United States.
So you're allowed to counsel with anyone in the United States. Now, you mentioned specifically New York. Is there...
No, so you have to have licensure within New York, but what I do is I use a separate platform where basically it's kind of going around the bush a little bit, but your counseling, as long as they're working with another company, then I can counsel them, but depending on what's included in that. So it gets a little complicated when you go out of state, but it's still possible.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, well, it looks like Ryan has left us.
Yeah, he did. So I don't know, guys, if I sounded like I was stuttering, it was partly because Ryan left in the middle of this, and then also we were having a little bit of technical difficulties. Yeah. But it probably sounds fine for you guys, but I was hearing triple in my headphones and then watching Ryan skedaddle. So if I sounded like I was mumbling or stuttering, I apologize.
Oh, no, I think it was fine.
As I'm talking about how it's a sophisticated career.
Yeah. I'll definitely make sure to edit it to make it sound like you were stuttering.
Please don't. Please don't.
All right, so you guys know where to reach us. If you've listened to us more than once, Ryan makes sure to mention all those things at the end of the episode. You check us out at TheGymWits.com. Feel free to send us any messages, or certainly send any messages to Toni. And we've got some great things coming up. Toni, thank you for such an awesome episode and for giving us such great insight into the career of being a registered dietitian.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
So, well, Ryan's not here, so I'll start off. I'm Justin Guild, a.k.a. Chef Sonic, reminding you that truth does not sell.
And I'm Toni Marinucci, a.k.a. Tips with Toni, your registered dietitian.
And we are the GymWits.